Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the connected universe. Well, we have a fascinating episode up for you this evening. Is history getting older? Because it really does seem like it keeps getting older and older and older. Whether it's humans, whether it's artifacts, whether it's the universe. And so we're going to look at a number of these things this evening. Do want to let those know that are watching, or I should say listening to the audio podcast of this later. Please join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, connecteduniverseportal.com. There you'll be able to, of course, watch all the videos that we showcase during the live stream, all the photos that are presented, and you can interact, of course, with us down in the chat. Now, in the Connect Universe portal, of course, you get not only the after show this evening, but also sneak peek behind the scenes videos, monthly Q&A videos, which that will be coming out tomorrow, the September Q&A video, exclusive articles, insider travel, blogs, and so much more. ConnectedUniversePortal.com. Also, check us out on Patreon as well, patreon.com/Mike Ricksecker. All right. So, hope everyone is doing well this evening. How many of you are actually watching Red Sox Yankees? Yeah, I had to step away from that. Red Sox fan here. Guilty pleasure. But the show must go on here. And Tom McNicholas down there in the house. Great to see you, Tom. Super Chat Superstar, as always. And yeah, for those of you, yeah, Super Chats always do exist out here. And so, yeah, subscribe, give that thumbs up, all that fun stuff when we are live here on the YouTube side of it. So, all right. How old is history? This is a question that I have thrown out there from time to time, even dating back like my really, really early YouTube days. And when I was going to make this like Ancient Supernatural Secrets series, something to that effect. And basically, I was going to highlight a lot of these different sites, these ancient sites of power that, as we discover more and more things, continue to get older and older and older. At least the research that they're doing ends up dating these things even further and further into the past. And really, this has been influenced, I should say, by the recent discovery. Oh, I meant to throw this out there. Just a real quick aside. I mentioned it last week, but we were nominated by the Parapod Podcast Festival for the best ancient history / archaeology podcast. And I made that announcement last week that we were nominated for that. I'm mentioning again this week because last week, what was kind of funny and unusual about that is we ended up doing a UFO episode. I was like, yeah, we're nominated for ancient history and all this, and we're going to talk UFOs and whether or not you should shoot at them. Today, we're getting into ancient history, so that's why I wanted to throw that one out there. Emil, great to see you as well. Thank you very much. So yeah, so all of this topic this evening was influenced by the recent testing that was done on this skull. This is actually a recreation of that skull. They actually have, so in this image here, the yellowish, orangish ones, brownish ones, those are the originals, and then the gray ones there are the cast or the reproductions of them. But so you kind of look at the skull and do the whole York thing. Oh, hey, that sort of thing. But what's really, really interesting about the skull is that it has dated human beings to 1 million years ago. 1 million years ago. Now, this is a really, really big deal because prior to that, now the articles and all this are saying it's predating humans to more than 500,000 years earlier than previously thought. Yeah, more than, but a lot more than, because we approximated Homo sapiens to have emerged about 315,000 years ago. So if you up that to 1 million, yeah, you can map that out to, what is that, 685,000 years. It's almost 700,000 year difference. It's just a bit more than a half a million. I mean, it's almost 200,000 more years than previously thought, which would be, 200,000 would be 2/3 of the 300,000. So yeah, it's like exponentially more. Now, the team working on this that did this testing, so it was, this was published in the journal Science, included scientists from a university in China and the UK's Natural History Museum. And originally, because of the age of the fossils, when they were examining these things, they were able to, carbon date, and they're like, oh, okay, these things are about 1 million years old. So it must be Homo erectus. But as they continued to do their testing, they figured out, no, this was not Homo erectus. This was actually Homo sapiens. So Professor Zijun Ni of Fudan University said, from the very beginning, when we got the result, we thought it was unbelievable. How could that be so deep into the past? But we tested it again and again to test all the models, use all the models, and we are now confident about the result. And we are actually very excited. So yeah, it's really pretty incredible that, we keep discovering that no, humans go further into the past, much, much further into the past than previously thought. History keeps getting older and older and older. And, we see these headlines all the time that, such and such a thing is older than previously thought, or humans showed up in this area, earlier than previously thought. These headlines keep coming around and around and around. And really the big reason for that is because Homo sapiens, the humans, are actually genetically and physically older than people previously thought. And we were living alongside for hundreds of thousands of years, Homo erectus, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and all of these, other, what we would call hominins, and coexisted together, of course, interbred, and all of these other things. We ended up surviving while the others died out. But yeah, we have been around much, much longer, which means that when we start looking at ancient civilizations, it shouldn't surprise us when we are making discoveries that things are much, much older than previously thought. So, as we dive further into this, it's not just humans. We're going to get into a lot of aspects of humanity that are older than previously thought. But we have other aspects of, well, let's just say the entire universe. And so I've been talking about this a little bit off and on since earlier this year, because as they fired up the James Webb Telescope and they're doing more explorations through this thing, well, this came out earlier this year. New evidence suggests the universe is twice as old as we thought. Twice as old. So it's like, okay, when they did the original calculations, did they just forget to multiply it by 2? Well, it's not quite exactly double, but most astronomers believe the universe is 13.7 billion years. That's what we've been saying for a long, long time. A new study says that figure could be closer to 26.7 billion. And this is pretty significant. Now, this is not the first time that we have redated the universe. Back in the 1920s, Edwin Hubble, Hubble telescope, thought the universe was about 2 billion years old. That was 100 years ago that they were thinking 2 billion years old for the universe. Then for a long, long time, I always say about 13.5 billion, but 13.7. Okay. I mean, we don't know the exact moment it was created. I mean, I guess I have mathematical models, but the math always starts kind of breaking down toward the end. In any case, if the universe is double the age, this is really, really significant. Now, we were talking a lot UFOs last week, right? and extraterrestrials. This is really, really significant when we start talking about other civilizations that are out there in the universe, because our planet, Earth, 4.5 billion years old. We're now saying, okay, humans are maybe a million of that. I mean, a very, very small fraction, right? um, we were already saying beforehand that other civilizations in the universe had, about a 9 billion year jump on us to develop their civilizations, their technology, and all of that to be able to become spacefaring beings, to be able to, whether it's a craft, whether it's some sort of stargate or portal or something else that they have developed. The Einstein-Rosen bridge, of course, they wouldn't have had Einstein or Nathan Rosen, but to be able to develop a similar type of technology to come here or elsewhere throughout the universe, they would have had 9 billion years. Now we're talking, wait a second, 22 billion more years on us. Okay, so that's just like out of the ballpark that they could have been developing that technology for on and on and on and on, all of those billions of years ahead of us. So yeah, it should not be surprising when we are seeing things zip in and out of our airspace, when people are interacting with beings, seeing things, craft are coming into our atmosphere that we can't make any sense of. We're shooting hellfire missiles at the thing and it bounces right off. I mean, yeah. Or came into our world long, long ago, established bases in the water. These sorts of things shouldn't surprise us that they would have this sort of technology ahead of us. If we are talking, they have advanced 22 billion years older than us. So that's a long, long time, especially considering humanity's only been around for a very, very short period of time. I can no longer say 315,000 years. Been saying that forever. And this is another stat that I always throw out there. You think about when the dinosaurs went extinct. Dinosaurs went extinct 64 million years ago, which is about 1.5% of the entire lifetime of the planet ago. Okay. I mean, it's a very, very small percentage. That's how old our planet is. We've been around for 1 million now from these new studies. Compare that to the rest of the universe. It's just astronomical. Okay, so I have a clip here that I want to play. I asked the question earlier, I think it was earlier this spring. How old is antiquity? This is something that I posted up on the Connected Universe portal. So it's a piece of a longer video. I ended up putting this, clipping this together for TikTok, and then I uploaded as an Instagram reel, Facebook, all of that. But I never made the entire video, the full 14 minutes, public, because this was a Mike's Morning Mug video on the back end of the Connected Universe portal. So you want to go watch the whole thing, subscribe to connecteduniverseportal.com or Patreon. It's uploaded there as well on Patreon. So patreon.com/Mike Ricksecker. Have the links down in the description. So let me go ahead and play this clip for you. And it's kind of a preview of the discussion tonight. And cross your fingers that this thing is going to play correctly for me. On my side, it'll play correct for you, but StreamYard has been having some issues here lately. Stick it in your pseudoscience here. Our pseudoscience from 100 years ago is our science today. How old is antiquity? Kind of inspired this morning because there was an article that showed up in my feed. It was talking about a wooden well that was found in Czech Republic over 7,200 years old. Yes, over 7,000 years old. And the archaeologists that dug this up were saying, this looks like Bronze Age, Iron Age, and like Roman-esque type of craftsmanship on this well. How did they have this back then? Keep finding this again and again and again, that history is a lot older than what we think it is. The traditional narrative just does not fit
anymore. Back in the early 1990s, we had John Anthony West and Robert Schoch redating the Sphinx. And the experts at the time were saying, no, that's garbage, it's rubbish, because, we don't have anything else that's old. That's one of their excuses. And then, they're excavating Göbekli Tepe and like, oh, yeah, there's one that is that old. And now Karahan Tepe, oh yeah, there's one that's that old too. So we keep finding things like that are older and older and older. Here in the United States, forever, it was, the Clovis culture was the oldest culture in the United States. Okay, I know it doesn't look like much. We're just out in Clovis, New Mexico, right across the border from Texas. There is this stigma for decades and decades and decades called Clovis first. Well, come to discover, of course, along the way, things like the footprints in white sands that are 23,000 years old. So when we have these other ideas crop up that, hey, we may have other things going on in antiquity that may rewrite our history, I don't understand why, the immediate knee-jerk reaction is to completely dismiss it. It's wrong, it's fake, it's pseudoscience. Stick it in your pseudoscience ear. Our pseudoscience from 100 years ago is our science today. There's a lot of politicking that goes on in archaeology, which is one of our newer sciences. 150 years ago, archaeology and an archaeologist wasn't really a term. These were all just guys who were exploring, and some gals who were exploring the Egyptian desert. Balzoni, who dug up Abu Simbel, he was the strong man in a traveling circus, but he had a fantastic engineering mind. So he ended up getting tasked to retrieve these different archaeological items, and he just became fascinated with exploring the area. They weren't archaeologists. I love it when articles show up in my feed that say, we found something that's older, we found something that doesn't fit the narrative, we found this old wooden well. The architecture of it just defies its age. This is something like what the Romans would have built, and that is truly a fascinating thing.
Okay, did not play on my side, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Crazy StreamYard. So we are going to cover a few of those different topics throughout this particular episode this evening. And yes, Colleen sure changes the whole missing link idea. Exactly. Yeah, they're finding, because of that, they're finding more of these connections now, and the fact that we really coexisted together. And yeah, Jose, we're practically living relics. And TC, because historians, scholars, and archaeologists are protecting a $1 billion tax-free industry. Well, yeah, there's a lot of that. There's the grant money that they are awarded to be able to keep their funding and basically keep their job, keep doing what they want to do. I always find it sad, because I know when they were younger, they probably wanted to be like Indiana Jones. And, when they're younger, they're making those discoveries, but then, the industry jades them. They have the gatekeepers that say, no, you need to stick along this narrative. You're going to find yourself on the outs. And so it's kind of the problem with most organizations, once they, I get it, because in the early days, it's kind of like the Wild West, and everybody's doing all these crazy things, and there's not enough, I want to use the word regulation. The problem is they get over-regulated, and it gets to the point where you can't really, move anywhere. And you have, again, those gatekeepers that keep you restricted in there. And it's one of the kind of the more freeing things from what I do, as more of like, I guess you could say my books are investigative journalism, where I'm not confined within those specific disciplines, and I can take a wider view of everything rather than be confined within this little compartmentalized box. So yes, absolutely. So, all right, we're going to get into a few of these different locations. And I mentioned Göbekli Tepe in that clip. So we're going to start there, because this was another thing that popped up here recently. Doesn't necessarily redate anything as it is. I think we have to ask some questions about it. So Göbekli Tepe, as many of you probably know, this site, it dates back at least 10,000 years. Neolithic, southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey. And this has really become what they are considering now to be the oldest temple, at least that we know of. And I'm seeing that the images that I need for this did not upload. Well, that is unfortunate. So, oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry. So what they have discovered here in one of the walls is this human statue that, well, what they say is that it was deliberate placement, well, obviously, and it suggests it served as a sacred guardian or ritual offering because it's embedded in the wall, potentially watching over ceremonies. And I guess the question for me is that really what it is? Like, we're going to just shove our guy there in the wall, our sacred guardian into the wall, and then forget about him in there? I mean, I suppose it's possible, but it also could be that the thing was just simply used for filler or some sort of repair, because we see that in other ancient architecture where older pieces were used because we didn't have any connection to those, or whatever it was previously used for, we don't need it for anymore, and so it gets repurposed. And we find this, like I said, in older architecture. This particular example here, these are Roman blocks in a medieval wall. So yeah, the Roman structure had basically become ruins, or they didn't use it anymore, and so they took the pieces away and put it into this wall. The Romans did the same thing too. When we go to the Egyptian labyrinth this year in November for the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour, well, most of that upper level on the labyrinth, we can't get down underneath, but the structures that were there on the surface, most of that is gone because when the Romans took over, they just dismantled it and built their own structures with it. Even the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, why do they not have the casing blocks anymore? Because, all this building material stacked up as a pyramid. Well, let's take off those casing blocks and we're going to build our buildings in the city with it. I mean, that happened a lot. Here on Elephantine Island, you can see down there in that pit along the left-hand side, well, those are columns. Those are not part of the original structure. So I guess the question here is that people debate about is, were they taken from a pre-existing structure and used here to help build that walkway, or was the walkway becoming damaged? Was it maybe caving in, and they used the columns there, those column pieces, as some sort of filler to help support it? Because you can see elsewhere throughout there, you have some other just regular smaller stones, but then the larger columns there help support it. And, we even find within, well, like with Akhenaten, we didn't know anything about Akhenaten until there was some restoration work that was being done on a temple, and they discovered within some of the columns they used for filler all this material about Akhenaten. And it was like, oh, there was another king here that was basically wiped from the record, and now here's proof of his existence. So yeah, we do find that throughout the ancient world, this reuse of material. So when we look at something like this, now we already know that Göbekli Tepe was used as some sort of religious site. So yeah, you could make a case that this helps to support that. Or it could be that this figure was from some other more ancient structure, that they took it from that and they repurposed it here into the wall to maybe help fortify it. Maybe the wall was starting to fall or crumble, so they used that as supportive material. We don't know. We weren't there. But I think we need to ask these sorts of questions rather than just say, oh yeah, it's a guardian spirit, that got shoved into the wall that, maybe is watching the ceremony. Again, maybe, but there could be about 5 other ideas that we could come up with it, come up for it as well. So, Pandora Farms, Lisa, wouldn't they have other pieces of shims to just stick in there? Well, maybe. I mean, yeah, it's the whole idea, the whole concept of a shim, except we're talking, these are, we're talking about large blocks of stone, things that are very, very heavy. So yeah, you're not just gonna, like he's a, little wooden shim in there. I mean, these are kind of acting as their own shim, like a stone shim, sort of. So yeah, in a way. Yeah. So what is wonderful about Göbekli Tepe, there's a lot of wonderful things about Göbekli Tepe, and sometime here in the next couple of years, we're going to make that journey out there to Göbekli Tepe. But one of the wonderful things about Göbekli Tepe is it helped with the redating of the Sphinx. Now, how is that so? Well, because when the idea of the Sphinx becoming older than it really was, we're talking the work of John Anthony West and Robert Schoch. This is from the early 90s. This is one of the things that kind of inspired me down this road when I first saw that back in 1993. Of course, Indiana Jones predated that, and that always fascinated me. But yeah, Schoch and West and their research there and redating the Sphinx, a lot of the opponents of that kept saying, things like, well, there aren't structures that are that old. Nothing that you're saying this, the Sphinx was at least 10,000 years old, but there's nothing else that's that old. And then Göbekli Tepe. So yeah, there is something that old. So let's get into the Sphinx here a little bit. Yes, our wonderful, wonderful Sphinx. And I always enjoy visiting the Sphinx. I mean, it's huge. It's wondrous. You can get fantastic photos like that with the Great Pyramid right behind us, standing silent and sentinel there on the Giza Plateau. And how this became redated. So Wes was reading material from Schwabe de Lubitz, who did a lot of research out there in the earlier 20th century. And Schwabe de Lubitz had made a remark in his writings that the Sphinx enclosure around it looked like water erosion, and nobody really had put 2 and 2 together. Yeah, it was a remark in his work, and nobody really paid it any mind. But you can plainly see the water channeling through there. I mean, this is something that, and it's funny to me, when the archaeologists at that time were trying to fight this, and they're like, "Oh no, it's just wind erosion." And it's like, I can go out in my backyard. Any kid with a hose can, make that channeling, playing in the mud in the backyard. Now, the horizontal line there, well, yeah, that is wind erosion whipping across once it was exposed. But this is water erosion from a more wet period of time. And so within that mystery of the Sphinx presentation, which just really captivated my attention, it basically presented all of this, was essentially showing how, during a more wet period of Egyptian history, which would have been 10,000 years ago during the Younger Dryas era, that the rains would have come down and created that channeling. But earlier on, they would have carved this out. So it was really nice the way they showed this. So the Sphinx enclosure, as they excavated the lion or lioness out of there, they basically used those blocks to create the Valley Temple in front of it. And another wonderful thing about that is another piece of evidence that you can look to see. So when you go to the Valley Temple, there are some parts that are exposed. So you have the limestone that's part of the Giza Plateau, from which they excavated the blocks there, built the Valley Temple. But then there's granite around it. Aswan rose granite brought up 500 miles from down the river. And you can see in some parts that are exposed that the limestone had been weathered away over who knows how many years. And then when they cut the granite blocks as a restoration years and years and years later, that those blocks were cut to perfectly match the weathering inside. So another indicator that, yeah, that was much, much older. So then the question is, how much older? And Schock was he's a geologist, okay? He's like, this is what the stone is telling me. I can see the channeling. This is what the stone is telling me. He was he was actually conservative when he said 10,000 years. I don't know him personally. Yeah, we're connected on Facebook. Don't know him personally though. But a lot of people who are closer to him do say that, yeah, he was very, very conservative in that. He does tend to believe it's actually much, much older than that. But it was already hard enough for people to take 10,000 years. But it does put it into that whole time frame. And so the other argument they kept throwing out there was, well, show us a potsherd from around that time frame from 10,000 years ago. And it's like, you're not going to find one. So like the Dream Stele there. The Dream Stele commemorates a restoration of the Sphinx. That is not original to the Sphinx. It was added later. Tutmosis IV, when he had his dream that he was supposed to restore this, and he did. So when you do restorative work of a sacred site and you're going to commemorate that, there's going to be a lot of pageantry with that, right? So you're basically, okay, look at the Sphinx enclosure, right? The whole thing is solid limestone. You can just see from here. Do you see any? I mean, it's all cleaned. It's all swept away. It is kept immaculate. You're not finding potsherds down there because they cleaned it up. So when you're doing your restoration work, you got your guys out there with your brooms and dustpans. I mean, it's brooms and dustpans for thousands of years ago, cleaning that whole area up. So if there had been like any material from 10,000 years beforehand, they would have cleaned all that up when they restored the Sphinx and in the enclosure area. So yeah, you're not going to find a potsherd because it would have been removed thousands of years ago. So I always found that argument to be quite humorous. So Tom McNicholas, Super Chat Superstar. I appreciate that. Since I cannot connect to the members page, found my favorite button, $10 Super Chat. Thank you so very, very much, Tom. It's been a while since I've been able to call anybody a Super Chat Superstar. So absolutely appreciate that, my friend. So Sarah Youssef. So how does stack time theory apply to the concept of the passage of time? Well, time doesn't exist. It's all here right now, concurrently. Totally different topic, than what we're talking here for tonight, except for the fact that time, history, all that. As I've said before, we just did time travel a few weeks back. As we're stuck in time, that quote unquote river of time is basically the rules that are applied to us in the fourth dimension. So our fourth dimensional consciousness being inside our third dimensional body, and you have all those other dimensions beyond ours, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions. All those others are outside the scope of time. So all time is here concurrently. There's a rule set on us, for our consciousness to stay within what you call that river of time. And the analogy many, many times that I use, is the river flows, time is the water. You move the banks of the river, it all floods out, and then you can it's like a big lake. It's all stagnant at that point. Or when you're flying over, if you drive through the town, you have a time relationship because you're passing all these things. But when you fly over, you can see it all at once. And so that's the way that, those other dimensions are able to see us. Every moment within the stack of time is its own frequency. And so it's a matter of trying to find, that proper frequency. So totally different topic than for this evening. So Lisa, I read somewhere long ago that stated the Sphinx was originally part of a different original carving and later made into a lion. True. Okay, so I actually do want to get into that a little bit because, and I actually have a clip to help us with that. So there are some people, it was like an alternative theory to the already alternative theory. So the alternative theory being that that this thing was carved 10,000 years ago. And most contend, I mean, it's most contend it was a lion or a lioness. But the alternative theory to the theory is that it was carved as a jackal originally, and then carved into a lion, possibly, and then carved in, or some people even say jackal to the pharaoh. Here's the problem with this, in a number of different reasons. I actually have a clip for this because this does come up a lot. So when you look at a jackal, okay, and here's the jackal that was there at King Tut's tomb, and you can see the very, very long snout. Okay, the problem with that really, really long snout onto something like this is that gravity, physics, the snout's going to break off. It's not going to be able to hold. You would need some sort of support under that to hold it up. Otherwise, it's just going to break off. So it's just not really feasible. Some people try to say, well, look at how straight the back is. Well, actually, it's not that straight. There is curvature to the jackal's back, right? And they try to say, well, what the Sphinx is, well, yeah, it's a tens of thousand years old yardang, and so it's just the wind. Basically any loose material that was on top just revealed the original bedrock. So, but the big smoking gun, there's two big smoking guns. One is the tail. So when you look at sculptures of jackals, this one doesn't even have a tail. This one has the tail straight out. This jackal here, you can't tell from there, but it actually goes straight down. It is always straight. And with the Sphinx, it's curved. It wraps around just like a lion's tail should. So I actually have a clip here that I am going to play for that, if this will cooperate. Okay, so we're at the backside of the Sphinx. Now, there is that this was either a lion or a lioness. Muhammad believes it was a lioness, and I'm fine with that. Either one. But that idea that it was a jackal or Anubis, a couple things that are wrong about that. For one, there's no way that the head would be able to support that snout without the snout falling off. It's just gravity and physics. Also, if you look down here at the tail is definitely a lion's tail. You look at depictions of, you see other sculptures of jackals and what have you, that they basically come straight out or straight down, and this is wrapped around as other lion statues are. And then also, the statue is facing to the east, which is really significant. A depiction of Anubis jackals. Basically, Anubis would ferry people over into the afterlife. The afterlife is the other direction, to the west. So depictions of Anubis would have that depiction. They'll have those statues facing the other way toward the west, and this is facing to the east. So to me, somebody's trying to come up with an
alternative theory to the alternative theory of the dating of it. We'll add something else in there, and it's just not correct. It's kind of a fanciful idea. It was certainly a lion, and of course the carving of the head of the face was much later.
So there you go. Those are the big smoking guns, disregarding the jackal idea. Robert Schoch actually does a deep dive into that in his book Origins of the Sphinx. But those are really the big things. The tail, the body is really that of a lion, and then the way that it is pointing would be the total wrong way for the jackal of Anubis. So those are the big things. So and then are there chambers within it? So that is another huge thing that a little beyond the scope of today's show, but there are. And there's a fantastic photo out there of Zahi Hawass actually coming up out of one of the chambers. Now there's the hole in the head. There's actually a trap door on the back side of it. So when they excavated it, one of the things that trap door goes down to is the fact that the back of it was broken, and they had to fix that. But there's interesting illustrations that come out of the 1920s of chambers that are within and under the Sphinx. I don't know about so much within. When you get to the Sphinx, and it's big, but it's like, those would have to be some smaller chambers. But underneath, there's a lot of evidence, of course, for chambers under the Sphinx. Now, we know that, and in those illustrations show it. We know Edgar Cayce talked about, there being chambers on the paw, under the paw. Schoch and West, when they were doing their research back in the late 80s, early 90s, they started doing some seismic testing and started finding evidence of those chambers, and then they were shut down for it. So, and then, of course, the recent scans here coming off the Giza Plateau showing that, yes, in fact, there are chambers underneath the Sphinx. So, there are definitely chambers there. So, all right, kind of need to move on a little bit here from the Sphinx. So we're kind of getting older and older. So Sphinx at least 10,000, possibly older. We're going to move to a little bit of a different part of the world right now, and that is Gunung Padang. So this is Graham Hancock featured this in his what is it? The Ancient Apocalypse, that series. But the news broke, of course, long before this. And we featured this some years ago when that news originally broke. So a lot of the research is coming from Danny Hillman, who is a geologist out there. So another geologist that, and here's the thing, it's like the archaeologists always want to discredit the geologists. The geologists, they're just looking at the rocks, they're looking at the land. And the archaeologists come along and say, well, that doesn't fit in our timeline that we've created. Well, okay, change the timeline. You have people that are experts at the rocks and the land telling you, no, it's older. And so, what Hillman basically discovered was that this area dates back some 25,000 years. So it's more than, right now, this is more than 50,000 blocks, creating a type of step pyramid. You see all these blocks are still around here. Thousands of pieces of columnar jointing cut and laid out. So Hillman's findings were published in Archaeological Prospection, October 20th, 2023. And a lot of the information that he showed, all of this data that they collected, which was absolutely incredible, that dated this whole area back 25,000 years with human interaction, having constructed this. Now, unfortunately, what ended up happening was the archaeological community threw this huge, massive fit and pressured the journal Archaeological Prospection to retract the article. And it got misconstrued that Hillman himself retracted it, but he didn't. He stands by to this day his research there. Absolutely 100%. But it was the archaeologists throwing their hands up in the air saying, no, it can't be that old. It can't be that old. It doesn't fit in our timeline, and pressured the journal because, the journal, they make their money in being able to, sell copies and all that. And they need the papers from scientists and journalists and all that, primarily archaeologists, since it's called archaeological prospection. And, you had these archaeologists towing the line with the narrative saying, we're not going to have anything to do with you anymore. We're not going to buy it. We're not going to submit papers to you. We're going to blackball you. And, that would make the paper go, that they would make the journal go defunct. So given that pressure, they retracted the Hillman paper on Gunung Padang, which is horrible that something like that happened. So it's fascinating research. And again, it just blows my mind that these are things that as a researcher, you want to discover. You don't just want to find, some little, vase in the ground that's like, okay, it's just like every other vase that we found, put it over there on the shelf with the others. A lot of the more traditional stuff that comes out of Egypt. So you got Zahi on tour doing his thing and giving his presentation. He's in brags, oh yeah, we've got new research coming out. And it's, yet another tomb that they opened up at Saqqara. It's same dynastic stuff. And it's just a different scribe or advisor to the pharaoh, whomever. And they find similar type artifacts that they have before, but new breaking research because, well, we didn't open that one before. But yeah, so it blows my mind that here's the new stuff. Here's the this is exciting that we're finding new information and things are getting redated. It's incredible. So we've spent a lot of time here in other parts of the world. What about America? Well, there's some recent news here, last couple of years, coming out of White Sands. I love White Sands. I've been there a few different times now. And it's just, you look at it and it's like, well, what's out there? It's just beautiful, beautiful white sand. It's funny. Kids will take sleds and sled down the hills of sand, almost like it's snow. It's pretty wild. But this area, tens of thousands of years ago, was not this desert area. It was teeming with life. And this is one of the illustrations that the National Park Service has of that area tens of thousands of years ago. It's a lake, and that's what you're looking at when you're looking at White Sands. This is an ancient lake bed that is no more. And yeah, you had animals there. You had water. It was teeming with life. And the thing that has really blown people away are the human footprints that they found there that are at least 23,000 years old. And so there was already, I had another clip here that I was going to play, but we're starting to run out of time. Maybe I'll play it during the after show. There was already a growing consensus that, okay, the whole idea of kind of quote unquote Clovis first. So the Clovis culture for a long time was the oldest culture that they had believed for a while established themselves in what we'd call America today. They had come down out of Alaska. So the whole idea of, the Bering land bridge up there that connected modern day Russia with Alaska, and they migrated across and then settled there in Alaska. And then they were basically stopped. They couldn't move any further because of the massive ice sheets, the huge glaciers that were up there, Laurentide ice sheet. Couldn't move past it. So they were basically stuck up there, couldn't come down until, climate change happens. It's been happening since the, planet was formed. till those melted. Then they were able to come down. And that was closer to 13 to 15,000 years ago when that happened. When it finally melted and they were able to come down. And we do know that happened. That absolutely happened. Nobody's saying that that didn't happen. People did come across the Bering Land Bridge and come down and all that. But 23,000 years is before that by quite a lot. And there are even some findings now in South America dating back some 40,000 years ago, even further back in time. So something is changing with our history. The narrative has to change. Now, most scientists are in agreement now that Clovis first is out the door. But they argue as to when the Americas, North and South America, were first settled and how they got here. There was, it was either earlier this year or late last year that they had made some distinct connections between Easter Island, South America. I mean, we know that happened, but much further back than previously believed. And even, of course, connecting Easter Island to Indonesia, again, further back than previously believed. How did they get there? And so it's one of those where we're not really giving those ancient peoples enough credit for how well they were able to navigate the seas. And, we're seeing that migration across the waters. And of course, like during the Ice Age, waters would have been lower. So, Easter Island right now, kind of like a little speck out there in the ocean. Well, there was more land there. It was a little bit of a bigger landmass. So it still could have missed it. I mean, it's still kind of hard to find it if you're just kind of randomly navigating the waters. But they had some navigational technology where they knew where they were going and they could make it there. So I want to check a couple of other comments here before we get to the last one. Lisa's asking, are you sensitive to energy, such as going to these historic sites? You personally feel either a good or a bad energy? Well, there's a lot of different energies there. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's that, I mean, for one, you feel that this is really, really ancient, and you can feel the energy of, I'm going to say, either it's, it's just a lot of different things. It depends on the location. Maybe it's older than it is, or, this was a site that was used, for practicing energy. Like when you go into the Stargate chambers there in Egypt, you can still feel some of that residual energy that's there. And of course, these sites were built there to tap into that energy that's there in the ground. And some of that is still prevalent. So it's like, okay, you can feel that this is powerful. I guess maybe that's the word that I'm looking for. So yeah, it's really, really interesting when you go to these more historic locations. And we've done meditations at these locations and have been able to get those visions, get those downloads of things that occurred there at these locations, which are really, really fascinating. And then, yeah, Jose, Stargate, that was one of those. It was that came out the year after. So Mystery of the Sphinx with Schock and West. Charlton Heston was the host for that. That came out in 93. It was the following year in 94, the film Stargate came out. And it was kind of the combination of those two. And then again, plus the fact that I grew up on Indiana Jones, where it was like, okay, I'm fascinated by all of this. But those two there, 93 and 94, really intrigued me to, there's something more behind all of this. So, and then have there been hauntings reported? Well, it's interesting. So the city that's grown up around it, like the one hotel that's there, the Mina House, is supposed to be very, very haunted. A number of those houses and homes in buildings are built over the top of old cemeteries and things like this. So and then there's so much that's there that the city is really encroached upon. That, yeah, between it, kind of like Lisa was saying there, with the energies, those ancient energies are still there. And now people are building their houses and businesses and things like this on top of it. So strange things end up happening. Absolutely. So, okay. Been redating America a little bit here with White Sands. Let's go back a touch further from that. How far back does this go? That's 23,000 years. We've redated it some more. How about 130,000 years? So San Diego, humans expand, and we end up, I'll say this, it's when you see these huge construction projects and you're like, oh, there goes this nice, beautiful piece of nature. But a lot of those huge construction projects like that, when they start digging, there are some fascinating things that they find that you would not have. You just going out there with your shovel, you're not going to find. It's like the big backhoes and things like this that are out there that start digging stuff up. And it's like, whoa. And one of those cases, when they were putting in a highway there in San Diego, they came across these mastodon bones that were 130,000 years old. But the thing that blew people away was that the bones and teeth of the mastodon showed evidence of modification by early humans, which of course blows the entire timeline away. Absolutely. I mean, okay, 23,000 years. Well, that's before Clovis. 40,000. Oh, now we're getting really 130,000 years ago. So humans have been in this area a very, very long time. And it redates yet again the history of humanity, because we have this this narrative for so long that out of Africa 300,000 years ago. Well, that one was a million years old. That's coming out of China. So where did humanity come from, really? I think it's getting a lot grayer, and the answers are, when we finally dig deeper and deeper and deeper, I think they're going to be really, really surprising. The whole Bering Land Bridge concept. Well, even though it happened, we can throw that out of the water as far as how humans came to the Americas, because they came through some other means. Did they come up through? You could make a case: Indonesia, Easter Island, South America. Maybe those are the ones from the 40,000 years ago, and they eventually came up 23,000 years there in New Mexico. Well, all the way over there in San Diego, 130,000 years. Where'd those guys come from? We don't know. We don't know. Survivors of Mu or Lemuria? Maybe, because there are stories, that come out of the American Southwest of, the ant people helping the survivors of the Great Cataclysm. Of course, which great cataclysm? Because there were many great cataclysms. So, all right, I'm going to take a look at your last comments and questions. We're going to kick over to the after show. Again, those that are listening to the podcast version of this later, please join us every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. And of course, check out the Patreon as well. So those, really, when it comes down to that, those that are at the time traveler level of the Patreon, you automatically get access to Connected Universe Portal. Anybody who's a member of the Connected Universe Portal, you've got the Patreon there. So in Pandora Farms, Lisa, other planets, yeah, very, very possible. This is something that I throw out there often, I think, is that I don't think humanity is originally from here. I believe that we do come from somewhere else. Probably why the Egyptians kept looking toward the constellation of Orion. This is where we're going. They always talked about it as a return. They are returning to the constellation of Orion. And then the kings would become stars up there in the heavens. Well, wouldn't you know that the Orion Nebula up there is a star generator? How did they know that? How did they know that? A lot more coming out about Mars. I've been posting about here. They keep finding more and more evidence of life existing on Mars. And, I think what happened along the way as we're probably survivors of another solar system out there. I mean, our solar system, we know, was born out of another, and it 5 billion years from now is going to be gone. So we eventually have to move off the planet, go somewhere else. And that's probably what happened is, we are survivors again. If the universe is 13.5 billion years old or almost 27 billion years old, either one, the universe is far, far older than our planet. So the idea that as your planet is about to, as nature happens, sun becomes a red giant, and then, that's it. So, we survivors, did we, and even possibly not, doesn't even have to be straight to Mars. That planet that was in between Mars and Jupiter, did we stop there first, inhabit that, then go to Mars, then come here? I mean, we don't know. We have no idea. But it's interesting because, as we move along, we're going to have to go back out there, because eventually we're not going to be able to survive here. We're going to have to move back out. And so, us taking a look at Mars would be really a return for us. And then when we move out of this solar system, it will be a return to the greater universe. So, so Lisa, how do you join the after show? So that's through the portal. So you would log into the portal site, and then there's the you'll see as one of the when you log in your library there, you'll see the option there for the community and live stream show and all that. So yeah, I forget exactly what it's precisely called, but you would see it back there. So all right, everybody, that will do it. I'm going to kick over to the after show for now. And for everybody else, till next time, time really exists.